Tucked away on the coast of southern India, there's a Christian community with a story that started nearly 2,000 years ago. Today, we're diving into the incredible history of the St. Thomas Christians of Kerala, a church with roots as ancient as the faith itself, and a truly remarkable story of survival.
And that brings us to the big question, right? How did this really unique Christian community, one that was spiritually connected to ancient Mesopotamia, manage to thrive for 2,000 years in India? How did it survive centuries of pressure and division? Well, let's find out.
All right, so our story kicks off, as tradition tells it, with the arrival of an apostle himself, right on the shores of India. So tradition says that St. Thomas the Apostle landed in Kerala way back in 52 AD. Now, over the next few centuries, this new community got a boost from Christian immigrants coming over from Mesopotamia. And for more than 1,500 years, think about that, the church was basically one unified community. Its style of worship, the East Syrian liturgy, was really distinct, and it kept this deep spiritual tie to the Church of the East, which was centered in what we now call Iraq and Syria. But this long era of peace and stability was about to be completely upended. In the 16th century, a new European power shows up on the scene, the Portuguese.
This chart really lays out the fundamental problem here. On one side, you have the St. Thomas Christians, with their own ancient traditions, their own local leadership. Then the Portuguese arrive, and they bring their own form of worship, the Latin Rite, and a totally different structure, all governed directly by European bishops under the Pope. They were immediately suspicious of the local church, accusing them of a heresy called Nestorianism, which was a really complex old theological debate, and they basically decided the local church needed to be purified and brought under their thumb. It was just an inevitable collision of two worlds.
And it all came to a head at the Synod of Diamper in 1599, and listen, this wasn't a friendly negotiation. It was a power play, a forceful campaign by the Portuguese archbishop to completely erase the local church's identity. He even went so far as to burn many of their ancient prayer books written in Syriac. So for the next 4 decades, the community was forced under the rule of Jesuit bishops, and you can just imagine the deep resentment that started to build.
This pressure to conform, to just abandon their heritage, it couldn't last forever. By the middle of the 17th century, this community finally reached its breaking point.
So let's just walk through how this happened. First, a local leader, Archdeacon Thomas, steps up to lead the resistance. Then, a little glimmer of hope arrives. A bishop named Ahatala shows up from their mother church, but the Portuguese intercept him. And a rumor, whether it was true or not, spread like wildfire that they had drowned him. And that was the final straw. Absolutely enraged, thousands gathered to take a stand.
And what they did next became legendary. It's known as the Coonan Cross Oath. Thousands of them gathered together and swore they would never again submit to the Paulists. That was their name for the Jesuit bishops. It was this incredibly powerful, unified act of defiance, all to save their ancient traditions and their freedom.
But here's the thing. This dramatic act of independence, it didn't lead to a simple, happy ending. Instead, it was the beginning of centuries of really complex fractures and divisions inside the community itself.
So even though the oath was this big, unified moment, the path forward, well, it wasn't unified at all. Roman missionaries came in and pretty quickly persuaded a huge majority, about 73% of the congregations, to return to communion with Rome. The other 27% stayed independent, and that right there was the first major split in this church that had been undivided for so long.
Now, the independent group, they were desperate for leadership, and they made a really pivotal choice. In 1665, they accepted a bishop from the West Syrian Church. And here's the profound irony. To preserve their independence from the Latin Rite, they ended up adopting a completely new Syriac Rite, one that was actually different from their original East Syrian tradition. This created a whole new major branch of Christianity in Kerala. Meanwhile, what about the part of the community that was trying to cling to their original East Syrian tradition? Well, for them, it was just a relentless struggle. For over 200 years, they fought just to bring bishops over from the Middle East to lead them, and they were constantly facing opposition and legal challenges. This long battle for survival finally paid off in a 1925 legal ruling that secured their identity and property, and it allowed their ancient tradition to formally carry on. So, as they entered the modern era, their hard-won identity started facing new challenges. But this time, the challenges were coming from within.
You're not gonna believe this, but after everything they had been through fighting outside forces, an internal dispute in 1964 over how church leadership should work led to yet another painful split. For For the next 30 years, the church was divided into two competing factions.
But then, in 1995, something really remarkable happened. The two factions decided to set aside their differences, and they officially reunited. It was this monumental moment of reconciliation that healed a 31-year-old wound and, honestly, set a powerful example of unity for everyone.
So, after this epic 2,000-year journey of unity, then division, then reunion, what does the Church of the East in India actually look like today? The key takeaway here is that this is not a museum piece. Today, the church is vibrant, it's united. It proudly uses its ancient liturgy, it operates under a modern constitution, and it's growing. A really landmark event happened in 2010 that showed just how far it had come. For the first time ever, the worldwide Holy Synod was held in India. And there, they consecrated 2 new Indian bishops, signaling just how strong the church is and how deep its roots are in its homeland.
This 2,000-year epic of survival, division, and reunion really leaves us with a powerful question. In a world of constant change, what does it truly take for community to hold on to its identity? The story of India's Church of the East shows us that resilience isn't just about resisting outside forces. It's also about the difficult but absolutely essential work of healing divisions from within.